Bum, 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 bum. Star Trek is gay, and it always has been. The second season premiere of Star Trek's original series, I would argue, is one of the most important episodes of 20th century science fiction. With the airing of this episode on September 15th, 1967, one of Star Trek's lesser celebrated but more widespread contributions to popular culture was born. Amok Time formed modern-day slash-fiction. In simpler terms, Star Trek created shipping. Obviously, fan fiction existed before Star Trek. Some of the 19th century's greatest authors contributed to continuing stories of characters that they loved. Peter Pan author J.M. Barrie wrote a Sherlock Holmes novel. And H.G. Wells, the majority of his output was, let's face it, an entire love letter to Jules Verne. And even Jane Austen's fans got into the mix, writing stories as early as 1913. While Star Trek didn't invent the genre, it did create a new roadmap for how it would unfold in the future. The plot of Amok Time revolves around Mr. Spock, who is suddenly acting irrational and out of character very emotionally. Spock is in the beginning phases of Pon farr, the Vulcan mating ritual. In order to expel this buildup of horny hormones and psychic energy, Spock has to travel to his home planet of Vulcan and perform the Pon farr mating ritual with his wife that we didn't know about until right now. But don't worry, it was an arranged marriage that was set up by his parents when he was a child. Ugh. See, if Spock doesn't go back to Vulcan to perform the Pon farr ritual, he'll die. That's right. Star Trek created the trope of fuck or die. See, it's in this exact moment where Captain James T. Kirk becomes the ultimate wingman. Kirk violates direct orders from Starfleet. He abandons a mission, also that he could fly his best friend across the galaxy to get laid. The rub to all of this is that when the Enterprise eventually reaches Vulcan, we find out that T'Pring has no desire or no plans whatsoever of honoring Pon farr with Spock. She's fallen in love with a Vulcan man named Stan. He's full-blooded, whereas Spock has that pesky little half-human, half-Vulcan thing going on. T'Pring denies Spock Pon farr. But to top it off, she then invokes a challenge for Stan to win her hand in marriage over Spock. But that challenge is a fight to the death. Kind of shocking for a society that's highly logical and extremely unemotional. T'Pring needs to choose a champion for this fight, and it sure as hell isn't going to be Stan. T'Pring chooses Kirk. It's here where we get into the basis of slash fiction. The fight between Kirk and Spock is 10 minutes of the two of them rolling around on top of each other in the sandy ground. I have never been able to look at this scene, as have hundreds of thousands of she's, he's, and theys over the last 55 years, been able to interpret this as anything other than homoerotically charged. Because in between the throwing punches and clashing of weapons, Kirk and Spock are dry humping each other in the dirt. The fight culminates with Spock strangling Kirk, killing him. The murder of his friend represents plot-wise the end of the fight, but metaphorically acts as the physical catharsis of Spock's biological urges. In layman terms, Spock nuts. McCoy beams Kirk's dead body back to the Enterprise. Spock admits to T'Pring that her plan was logically flawless and ultimately grants her release from their arranged marriage. Before he goes, though, he slaps Stan in the face with the biggest bit of shade that I've ever seen. Before he leaves, Spock also says live long and prosper for the first time in the series history. And Pavel Chekhov's introduced in this episode too. Wow, a lot really happens in this episode. Back on the Enterprise, Spock is grief-stricken over the events that occurred on Vulcan. That is until he finds Jim alive and well. See, McCoy dosed him with a drug before they started their fight, and it only kind of slowed Jim's heart down to make it appear that he was dead. The outburst of relief and unbridled joy on Spock's face upon finding out that his captain is alive is not one born out of friendship. That shit's born out of love. The way Amok Time spurned fandom on over the next 55 years, I mean, it's downright shocking to know how this episode had an effect on fandom. In the first dark age of Star Trek, that being the 6-year period between the end of the original series and the start of the Filmation cartoon, fans would gather for the first time to celebrate and talk about this show that they loved so much. It was here where conventions as we know them today were born. One of the items you could pick up at these cons were self-published fanzines. And some of these fanzines featured stories between these two men, conveniently located in bins labeled K/S. That's why it's called science fiction! These stories would range from Harlequin romance novel-style tales to, cue the sexy saxophone music, penthouse forum letters. The romantic and erotic pairings of Kirk and Spock were one of Star Trek's more undiscussed elements, but also one of the ways that fandom kept the show alive. At least it was uncommon until the adventation of the internet. You cannot watch a movie or a TV show now without fans of that show pairing multiple characters together. Be it straight, gay, gender-flipping characters, fans have come to completely change the narrative told around that fiction. Hell, smashing the names together of your favorite duo comes out of the pairing of Kirk and Spock as Spurk. Go into a bookstore and look around at the number of Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy novels that have been written within the last 15 years. Sometimes they're fighting zombies, sometimes they're out solving mysteries together. You couldn't log into Tumblr in 2014 and not get lost for hours searching through drawings and headcanons of Chris Evans' Captain America and Sebastian Stan's Bucky. Sometimes it's the people playing the roles that fuel the fire of fandom most often. William Shatner broke down recording a scene with Leonard Nimoy one time, and he blew his line and just started proclaiming his love for Spock on the set. The two also played the sickbay scene in Star Trek The Motion Picture completely as if it were a romantic scene. But sometimes it's the storytellers themselves that understand the love between two characters. Gene Roddenberry, during the adaptation of his screenplay of Star Trek The Motion Picture for its novelization, he added a footnote to one of the pages. He wrote a word in the Vulcan language that encapsulated the nature of the relationship between Kirk and Spock. Tihila. In Vulcan, Tihila has multiple meanings. One of those words being brothers. The other of those words being lovers. Gene, you sly rascal. As I always say when I talk or write about Star Trek in great detail, go and watch. Discover it for yourself. Then maybe afterwards, do a Google search for some K/S stories, or as it's more commonly known today, Space Husbands. But it's all been up there between Kirk and Spock since the very beginning. In space, everything is gay. thank you so much for watching. Star Trek is one of my favorite things to talk about. If you liked this video, please head on down below and give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel too, and ring the bell for notifications for future videos. I've been your favorite former twink. Live long and prosper.